it is absolutely an honor for me to do this. And of course, I graduated last year, yeah, very recently, less than a year ago. So I hope to share as many as I can while they are still fresh in my memory. And speaking of my research, if I could perhaps use one sentence to summarize my research, that is, I aim to translate the technological advance into clinical applications to improve diagnosis and treatment outcome. And among all the diseases, I have a particular interest in the diseases of the brain, such as stroke and dementia. And my DPhil thesis focused on developing the advanced MRI techniques to understand the structure and the functions of the brain. And having achieved a technical competence, now I plan to increase the clinical impact of my research during my postdoc training. Yeah.
Thanks, Moss. That was really helpful just to give us a bit of background into what your research has been and what you're hoping to achieve in your now postdoctoral research fellow at Stanford. So I'm really interested to hear about how you successfully secured that role. And did you always know that you wanted to stay in academia? So I think so many DPhil students particularly go through ups and downs during their course of the DPhil. But did you always know you wanted to stay in academia, or did you think about doing something different and perhaps moving into industry or something entirely different at any point?
Right. I mean, so actually, when I received this question from the email, I spent a lot of time just thinking about my personal experience and then how I decided to continue in the academic career. But quite honestly speaking, at the beginning of my DPhil, I did not have a very clear vision about whether I should stay in academia or perhaps join a company or even start my own company. However, I did have some very general and vague ideas about my professional life after graduation. For example, I hope that in my post-DPhil job, I could spend perhaps 50% of my responsibilities with the skills that I have already acquired, and maybe the other 50% through continuous learning. Now, in addition to that, I was hoping to have a mentor or a coach to guide me through the uncertainties of different career aspects, and also work with a team with people from different backgrounds to achieve a common goal. So this kind of ruled out the idea of starting my own company. And also, I think for a lot of us, we have this ultimate career or life goal to achieve some sort of financial independence, such that we don't have to work for the sake of money, while having a decent life and contributing to the society. Therefore, I would always wanted to work in an organization that gives me the opportunity to connect with some successful entrepreneurs and investors. And finally, I think it gives me a better sense of satisfaction if I could work in an organization with a high social responsibility, which means that I'm very unlikely to work in a company that harms the environment or in a perhaps male-dominated profession. And speaking of how I successfully found my current position, it's actually through my interaction and networking experience during my conference trips, where I met a lot of amazing and talented researchers and peers. And through our conversation, I realized that my skills could potentially be very helpful to their projects when we were discussing projects and data. And gradually I have decided to continue my career in academia. But of course, nowadays everybody knows that staying in academia or following or becoming a professor is not a very easy career. So I'll see how far I can go in academia. Yeah.
Thanks, Moss. And I think that's certainly something that we've seen in our alumni. Increasing numbers seem to start out in one field, which might be a postdoctoral research position, but then over time move into fields that are quite different or establish their own companies, spin out from organizations that they're involved with. And I think one of the great exciting parts of being involved in the St. Cross community is watching how people's careers unfold. And I think it's going to be a really exciting period of time ahead of us as our alumni community is growing, to see where all of you end up and what you all go on to do. But that's a really helpful starting point. So you've talked about building networks and meeting people as you went. At what point did you really start looking for a postdoctoral research position? Because I think one of the challenges as a DPhil student is you're never quite sure when that end point is going to come and when you're finally going to put that thesis in, have it all ready, and for you to be able to move on. So how did you start balancing that, and when did you start looking for the role that you've now got?
Right. Well, personally, I had all these same issues when I was studying for my DPhil at St. Cross. And honestly, I didn't have a very clear time point at which I've decided, okay, I'm gonna start looking for a job, or I'm gonna spend all my time writing my thesis and then perhaps start looking for a job subsequently. But there's like a continuous theme in my DPhil time, that is to keep expanding my my social networks, not only with people in academia, but also with very talented people in the industry, or just anyone in Oxford. And so I guess this comes to a question about time management. For example, a lot of students ask me how I made a balance between writing my thesis and searching for a position at the same time. Well, I would say that sometimes we just have to do both, or sometimes we have to focus on one thing and perhaps leave the other aspect to the next stage. And when it comes to discussing our prospective positions or jobs with a potential employer, I found it very effective to kind of delay our commitment with some reasonable explanations during a job interview, for instance. Because I understand that in Oxford, we often have this mentality that we often dismiss ourselves because there are just so many smart and intelligent, amazing people in the bubble. But in reality, we are among the most talented people in the world, and especially for DPhil and master students, since our research or thesis are extremely focused and original. We are the only expert in the field for a particular type of job, I believe. So if a potential employer is interested in our skills, then it is possible that nobody else in the world could do it better than us, to be honest. So, and from a employer's perspective, a company would rather wait for the most suitable candidate than wasting their time and resource on somebody else who is less competent. So this is exactly when I had to balance between writing my thesis and looking for a job. For example, during my discussion with my current supervisor or manager, I remembered I asked him to kind of delay the starting time, or just give me some time to focus on my thesis writing and publishing my thesis chapters before I could make a commitment. So by doing so, I believe that the potential employer will think that we will also publish our work and papers for them, when we move on to the next career. So I personally found this strategy to be very effective when in job interviews, when we have to make a balance between our primary responsibility, which is thesis writing or doing experiments, and looking for the next career development. Yeah.
Not being afraid to ask and to negotiate is really what you're saying there. But when did you know the point had actually come to finish at Oxford? Because I think one of the challenges is that you could keep on going. You've always got a relationship with your supervisor within Oxford to continue to publish. So when did you know it was now right and you should move on and move to Stanford to take up the position that you've got?
That's a very good question. So if I could just share a little bit of my history at St. Cross, I spent about four and a half years in total when I first started my DPhil until I left Oxford. And among the 4.5 years, I spent about three and a half years working as a DPhil student, doing research and then writing my thesis, preparing for the viva, and the last year of my time at St. Cross, I spent on preparing for different interviews and of course other job applications, and wrapping up my thesis and publishing my thesis chapters. So if you ask me the time that I've decided to move on to the next stage of my career, I would say perhaps after my viva, I started actively looking for different opportunities. But of course, most of the people that I spoke with about postdoc positions were the people that I've had met during the first 3 or 4 years of my DPhil, either in a conference or just in our own study group where we have a common research problem. So I think it's extremely important to build this foundation of professional network before we actually step out to look for positions. And quite honestly speaking, my current position was not publicly advertised, but it was through a negotiation with my current supervisor. So I think by actively seeking for more connections in our field, and letting others know we are in the job market, then people would help us, or people would recommend positions to us, and also with a very solid track record, then people would believe that we will be able to deliver the same results that we have done in Oxford, and it's just a matter of time when we start. So I think in academia, I don't know about in the industry, but at least in academia, the actual starting time for a postdoc and the scope of the project can be very flexible. So, but the key thing is that your commitment and your vision matches the plan of the new lab. Yeah.
So again, you've touched back on networking, I think there. Was that something that came naturally to you, or was that a skill that you had to learn as you went through your DPhil? Because I think I've spoken to a lot of alumni and current students who say that's something that doesn't necessarily always fit with their sort of comfortable zone. So was it something that you found easy, or how did you work on that? And what did you do to help facilitate those networking opportunities?
Sure. Well, personally, I think I share the same anxiety or awkwardness with a lot of other people when we have to reach out or speak with a stranger or someone that we barely know, or someone we only read their papers. But the good thing about Oxford is that there are so many trainings and workshops that that teaches us how to engage in an effective and successful conversation with somebody that we really wanted to meet. And so, for example, whenever I talk with a postdoc or a DPhil student, I would like to discuss things like data collection or the actual experiments, because this is something that we all have in common, and then also something that we have problems with. So these are actually the best source for collaborations and future discussions, because if both of us have the same problems, then it's likely that we will have to solve them together in our work. And so, as I said, this is also how I found my current position, by a very casual conversation with one of the postdocs here. And I think in addition to discussing projects, it's also helpful to find out the working culture of the other group, because a healthy and productive working culture could catalyze the success of our careers. And one thing that I realized when I joined the postdoc training is that most postdocs are responsible for organizing like weekly seminars for the department, and we always have trouble inviting speakers. So I think for our current DPhil students or master students, this is an excellent opportunity for you to communicate your research to a broader audience and increase the impact of your work. And I understand that some of you may be worried about the scope or the impact of your topic, of your research, but I can assure you that, I mean, every DPhil thesis in Oxford is an extremely important piece of research that deserves attention. So there's really nothing to worry about. And of course, in most seminars, people would come for the free food or the free cookies. free cookies. So yeah, so this is an excellent opportunity for our current students to seek for more audiences. And apart from communication with people in our own discipline, I also found it very helpful to communicate our work with the members of the public. For example, because I think this could also improve our communication skills. For example, the question that I always like to ask myself is that what would be the banner of my lab when I become a PI? So throughout our career, I think it's very crucial for us to maintain this kind of professional relationship, or with the members of the public. For example, I actually often receive newsletters from the college about the achievements of our current students. I remember things about our DPhil students playing an active role in developing the vaccine for the coronavirus, or presenting their studies to the MPs of at the parliament. So I believe that these are all very important actions that we can take to improve our publicity and communication skills. So I think, like I said, the beauty of Oxford is that there's nearly an expert in every domain of the university. So if our current students is thinking of these kind of activities in terms of public speaking or public engagement, then I would highly recommend you speak with the public engagement officer of your department, and develop a plan to communicate your research with the members of the public. And I mean, we are not necessarily hoping to perhaps find a job or meet a very important person by doing this, but I think in general it will improve our communication skills and make us less anxious when we speak with strangers in the future. Yeah.
Thanks, Moss. And I just add to that, for the current students who are listening to us at the moment, that it's something that college is very happy to support you with as well, particularly with where we are at this moment in time. We're really keen to try new ways. So although we can't have physical St. Cross talks in the college as we would have done and invite speakers, including students, to get up and share their research, we can easily look at forums like this using Zoom to set up conversations for you to talk about the work that you're doing, sharing that with fellow students who might not be from your immediate subjects and disciplines, but also sharing it with alumni and our emeritus fellows. So please don't be shy about getting in touch. If you've got ideas, if you'd like to try something, we'd be really keen to support you in that. Moving on a little bit now, Moss, one of the things that I'm constantly amazed at is the absolutely global nature that St. Cross is. I think we all know that from being there as students, and it's certainly true when I look at it from an alumni perspective. We've got just short of 4,000 contactable alumni across the world in 114 different countries, which is really quite remarkable and something that's quite different to many of the other colleges. So you've ended up in the USA. Was that by design or is that by choice?
Wow, this is an excellent question. So I don't think I purposely decided to have to come to the US when I was looking for the next training or the next stage of my my career development while I was studying at Oxford. But I would say that it's a very natural development. Of course, I mean, I understand that I mean, in a lot of other countries, they also do very amazing research with so many and talented and smart people. But for me, as I mentioned, I hope that my my new endeavor could consist of 50% of the things that I know already, and the other 50% are the things that I could learn continuously. So when I was thinking about whether to join my current research lab, they offered me the opportunity of being an expert in my current domain, which is something that I did in my DPhil thesis, but also the potential to develop to learn new skills. For example, in deep learning and in AI, and of course, as I mentioned, I always wanted to improve the clinical impact of my research. Then being able to work in a lab that has very close connection with the hospital would be ideal for me. So basically, these were the factors that I was considering when I was looking for different opportunities. But of course, I also applied for some other research labs, and some of them were successful, some of them were not. But I think the moment when I decided to come here was when my friend who was working here, or the person that I met during the conference, invited me here to give a talk and to just to sit in their meetings and then see how work is done here, so that I could have a better sense of the working culture in the current environment. So I think that played a very significant role in deciding, for me to decide whether I should come to Stanford or a different lab. So as I said, having these kind of personal connections with your peer in a different organization is extremely important to plan your career development. And more often than not, that person may be a lifelong mentor for us, because we might follow their footsteps when we have our own, in our own career development. Yeah, so basically that's how I came to the US, and then came to my current research lab. Yeah.
And other than dealing with a global pandemic, which probably few of us could have predicted, what has been challenging about settling in the US? They have quite a different model in terms of PhDs, and I've often spoken to alumni who have said that finding and establishing themselves in the US academia system, having completed a DPhil in the UK, is sometimes not always as straightforward as if you'd done your PhD in the US. So what difficulties or challenges have you found in setting yourself up there?
Right, that's an excellent question. Personally, I believe that although there are some small differences between the PhD training in the US and our DPhil in the UK, or perhaps in Oxford, the mission of training a research student is pretty much the same. maybe in the US, people would spend more time going to lectures or working as a TA, whereas in the UK, we primarily spend our time on our own thesis. So at the moment, I haven't experienced a lot of like real challenges in terms of like how my previous research skills could enable me to do my my current responsibilities. But perhaps there are some aspects of the work or living that may be a little difficult for us to be familiar with. For example, one thing that I found was a bit uncomfortable was the negotiating my job offers. So I understand that in many places, the like the academic salary or the job offer in a university is negotiated collectively by a union or by a group of people. But in the US, most of the institutions actually expect the candidates to negotiate. I think this is because if we demonstrate the ability to negotiate for ourselves, then our potential employer will believe that we will subsequently negotiate for the organization in the future. So when I was deciding, whether to join my current lab and negotiating my current job offer, I actually asked a lot of people. Most of them were in the U.S. and also my friends at Oxford, and of course a lot of these online resources about offer negotiation. So personally, I think this type of negotiation is quite different from, for example, the negotiation of buying a car or a bike from someone where we will never see that person again. Instead, it's like a problem solving where both parties would aim for a successful outcome. So, which is why we have to be extremely careful about the language that we use and the request that we make. So I know that everybody has different circumstances when it comes to, for example, salary or benefits, or even the actual starting date. But I would suggest our current students to perhaps join some workshops on offer negotiation, and of course practice communication skills, because I found it more effective to negotiate by phone or by Skype instead of by email. And of course, in the US, there are some elements that's particularly unique for the US job market. For example, the health insurance. And I understand that this is a very complicated territory in the US, health insurance, because the amazing NHS doesn't exist in the US. So just be careful when you are thinking about the job offers, and also if how do I put it? I mean, yeah, I think I recently come across a study that shows women actually tend to negotiate less than men. So I think, I mean, unfortunately, we are still living in a world with gender inequality, that many institutions pay women less than their male counterpart. But I would encourage all the ladies to negotiate boldly and to promote eco-society, because this is something that is correct to do, and your employer will appreciate it. Yeah.
Thanks, Moss. That's some really interesting advice and really sort of hopefully a confidence to some of our students about how to go about negotiating and getting what it is they deserve, most honestly. I think another thing that you touched upon there, and it's something that often comes out of conversations with everybody involved with St. Cross, is that importance of understanding culture and cultural differences. And I think that's something that St. Crosses are really good at. You, for example, completed your undergraduate education in Hong Kong. You obviously did your DPhil here in the UK. You've gone to work now currently in the US, and that's not unusual at all. And what I often find is that there is a huge willingness amongst alumni to share their experiences of moving between different cultures, because different parts of the world, different countries operate in really quite different ways, and sometimes it can be quite subtle. And so although all of you, many of you, have possibly studied in different countries, I think transitioning to the working world in yet another country, in another culture, can be something that's really quite different. So Moss, is there anything particular about moving in a professional way that you haven't said already, and that you found that was quite different from sort of moving as a student from Hong Kong to the UK? Are there anything else that you'd want to add about then moving in a professional capacity to yet another part of the world?
Right. I personally enjoy being or living in a global community where my colleagues or my peers come from different background, because I believe that we would make a larger impact collectively, because everybody could contribute a small part from their experience. But of course, there are some difficulties or some challenges if we always have to relocate to a new location, let alone a new country. For example, I found it a little bit difficult to commit in a long-term relationship with my friends, because it is likely that we would spend maybe 3 to 5 years in one place, and then after that we move on to a new location. But thanks to technology, we are now so much closer in terms of connecting with other friends in the world and sharing our experiences or helping each other together. So I think I'm still learning how to do this better. And in terms of the cultural differences in different working environment in different countries, I believe that in the US, at least in my current lab in Stanford, people are very enthusiastic and passionate about results and deliverables. And also, since Stanford is within the Silicon Valley, where all the amazing innovation takes place, our working culture is very highly driven by innovation and by whether we could translate our ideas into a product or something that could genuinely help the society. And of course, everybody has this commercial value in their mind. For example, whether my idea, my innovation could launch a new startup company and perhaps eventually become the next Google or Facebook. But on the other hand, we also have a very thriving community that people not only compete with each other, but also look after and help each other. So I personally think that it is a very healthy, although competitive environment. And I think this is true for nearly for every like top research institution and good companies in the world.
Thanks, Moss. And I've just got one more question before I want to leave time for others to put in their questions and queries and things. If you just had to give one piece of advice to our current students or even our prospective students who will be joining us later this year, what would that be?
Wow, just one piece of advice. I would say for the current students or perhaps our prospective students, join as many activities or join as many workshops, trainings in the university as possible, and eat as many synchronous lunches and formals as possible, because the connection that we make in Oxford is going to be a lifelong asset for our career and for our life. Yes.
Thanks, Moss. And great to hear that St. Cross lunches finally got a mention. I was hoping they were going to appear somewhere in our conversation, because they always have to feature at some point in any conversation I have with alumni. So really pleased that they got in there right at the last minute. So it's over to students who are on the call currently. Have you got questions? Is there anything that you would like to discuss further that Moss might have mentioned? Are there aspects that you were hoping to hear Moss talk about that he hasn't covered yet? If you would either like to type out those questions in the chat function, or just unmute yourself and ask that question, this is your time. Deadly silence from everybody. I know that Moritz has already had to leave, but thanks you very much, Moss, for taking the time. This morning in your time, it's this evening for us here that are in the UK. I'm not quite sure where everybody else currently is in the world, but every time of day I know that people are very grateful. Any questions from anybody?
Maybe I could just ask one question, Moss.
Sure.
It's a little bit of a kind of, I suppose, a biased question a little bit, but I'm just curious, you were obviously a member of St. Cross for a few years, and we very much valued having you here. Would you say there's anything from a kind of either a cultural point of view or a practical point of view that you found and learnt at St. Cross, which you're now finding useful at Stanford? I mean, it's another university, but it's a different place, it's a different culture. I just wonder how that, whether there's anything in that transition which you would look back and say, actually, I'm really glad I did that at Oxford, because that's helpful now.
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. So I think nearly everything that I experienced in St. Cross had a very positive impact on my current career. So it's very difficult to just pick one thing that I think were the most important, but perhaps this global perspective or the cultural diversity in St. Cross played a very significant role in shaping how I interact with my current colleagues, because nearly all of them come from different parts of the world, and we all have different backgrounds. We all speak different languages. So I believe that the yeah, the global perspective of St. Cross is the most important the asset for the college, and of course the career development guidance that I had with, say, the colleagues in Oxford Career Services was also very important, because I remember I used to attend their one-on-one meetings with the experts there to map out a plan about how I should do things and what time, when I should do what. So they also played a very huge role in helping me find my current position. And of course, my DPhil supervisor, Professor Michael Chappell of Engineering Science Department, I'm very grateful for his guidance, because he not only guided my thesis, my research, but also transformed the way that I perceive the world. And none of my achievement would have been possible without his supervision. Yeah.
Thanks, John. We've got another question that's
Sure.
just come in here. So, Moss, how does your experience compare with other DPhil students you know who stayed on in academia? It would always help if I could read. I'm presuming here you've got friends who have stayed in academia here, possibly in Oxford in the UK. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that you know others who have gone to other parts of the world. So yeah, probably just summing up a little bit about your experience versus others that you know.
Right. This is a very interesting question. Well, as far as I know, since I only graduated less than a year ago, like I said, I'm still thinking about whether I should stay in academia in the long run and how far I would go. But at the moment, I am fully committed and passionate about my current work. And of course, there may be other factors in life that would affect my decision. And in terms of other people's experience or other DPhil students' experience after they completed their study, I would say that most of my friends who have pursued a postdoc training are still sort of on track, I would say. And actually, one of them just got appointed to a tenure track position in the Netherlands. So overall, I think they have very positive experience in academia. And also, I do know one person who left academia for similar jobs in the industry, where they could solve very important scientific problems and maintaining a better, I would say, a better financial stability if someone works in the industry. So I think no matter what we choose, academia or industry, there are successful avenues for us to follow.
Thank you, and I hope that answers the question. Has anybody got anything else that they would like to add either to that or any other questions? Moss, I'm probably speaking slightly out of turn here, but I'm sure that if others' questions come to people's minds after the conversation today, if they get in touch with me in the first instance, I can pass those on to you, and I'm hoping that you'll be willing to answer those if they arise. So please don't feel that if you come off the call and think of something, please do get in touch.
Of course. Well, like I said, I mean, if you are interested in sharing your research in our perhaps department seminars. We can do it on Zoom nowadays, I think. So please don't hesitate to contact me. I believe you can have my email from Victoria or from other members of the college, and I am very happy to connect you with people here or in other places, or perhaps you know, read your job application materials and so on. Yeah.
Thanks, Moss. That's a really great offer, and so I hope that students feel that they can take that offer up. And you know, I think it's fair to say that we've got a growing number of alumni who are all really keen to help and support. So if you feel that you've contacted Moss and got some insight there, but would like to speak to others, please do get in touch with me, and I will do my best to try and match you with other people who might also be able to offer and share their advice. So if there's no sort of further questions at this point, I think I'd just like to say thank you so much to Moss for taking
the pleasure
this morning to speak with us. In usual terms, we would all be sitting in the St. Cross Lecture Theatre and would give you a round of applause. So we might have to have a bit of a virtual round of applause.
Thank you.
But we all take our cameras off and
Thank you.
a bit of clapping. But no, really grateful for your insight, for sharing some of your experiences. And I think it's really nice to hear from alumni who have only just left St. Cross. I think it's one of the powers of an alumni community is that you have people who were here 50 years ago versus those that were here and left just last year. So we're really grateful for you giving up your time and for being very much a guinea pig in our first conversation. And if I've managed to record this, then I would like to say that I think it's been very successful indeed. So thank you very much, Moss. I hope that
Welcome. Thank you.
you, either with you coming back across to the UK, or we will no doubt be in the west coast of the US eventually when we're all allowed to travel again. But in the meantime, please, all of you, stay safe and well wherever you are, but please do keep in touch.